everyone, I'm Aaron, a breeding naturalist. Welcome back. I am doing some tide pooling, and I wanted to share with you some information on a really awesome creature that I found. Let's talk sea stars. This particular species of sea star that I found is called an ochre star, Pisaster ochraceus. And these are really fantastic animals. They're really cool. They're really fun to learn about for a lot of different reasons. One is that these, while they may look harmless and benign and fun, are actually voracious predators. These things will eat mussels, clams, fish, almost anything they get their hands on, or should I say arms. They're very, very impressive. And among other things, as a top predator, that kind of makes them a bit of a keystone species. Now, I've talked about keystone species before, where they are a species that have, compared to their number or sort of size, have a surprisingly large and almost impressively undue large impact on their ecosystem. And as a predator of so many different creatures, sea stars, in particular ochre stars, fit that bill. The way that sea stars move around are with these things called tube feet. See these little tubes coming out? On the underside of sea stars, there are these 5 bands of tube feet. They're part of what's called the hydrostatic skeleton of a sea star. And there are thousands and thousands of them. And they have almost like little suction cups right at the very tip. And that allows these animals to reach out, suction onto something, and pull themselves along. They aren't very fast, but they are very strong. When these things lock onto a rock, it is very hard to pry them off. And it's also one of the ways that they hunt. They will grab onto, say, a mussel, and they'll wrap a couple legs worth of tube feet onto one side of the mussel, and a couple arms worth of tube feet onto another side of a mussel, and they will start to pull and pull. And of course, the mussel doesn't want to open. The mussel wants to stay closed. The mussel has some very heavy-duty mechanisms to keep itself closed. But this pulling of the tube feet of a sea star is so strong that it can pry open the mussel. And then once it's got it open, eat what's inside. So they're very impressive, sort of slow, inexorable predators. One thing that makes sea stars, ochre stars like this one, and most other stars as well, very fascinating is that they belong to an entire group of organisms called echinoderms that have something called pentaradial symmetry. What does that mean? Well, penta, 5, radial, kind of out from a center circle. Symmetry meaning same. So we humans have bilateral symmetry, where there's a line sort of down the middle, and our left side and our right sides basically mirror each other across that line. Sea stars don't have that. Sea stars have 5 different rays or planes of symmetry. So basically, each one of these arms is the same as all the others. And they have 5. Some of them often have multiples of 5. So there are sea stars, not ochre stars, but other sea stars that have maybe 10 arms, or 15, or 35, right? But they're almost always about 5s. Now, there are some 6-rayed sea stars out there. They're cool, weird little exceptions. So like, this isn't a perfect rule, but by and large, pentaradial symmetry seems to hold pretty true. And not only of stars, but also the other echinoderms. So think like urchins and sea cucumbers and other creatures that are in this same group. Pentaradial symmetry. Very unusual body plan that these guys display. Another thing that makes these guys interesting is that they're actually surprisingly closely related to us. If you look at their DNA, and if you do sort of phylogenetic analysis, looking at how major groups of animals have evolved, what we find is the echinoderms, including sea stars, are more closely related to us than many other of the major groups of animals. So, for example, bivalves, things like clams and mussels, those are farther away from us. Think arthropods, so anything from beetles and other insects to crabs, lobsters, shrimp, those are all farther away from us. Worms, think like earthworms, things like that, farther away from us. Those are all more distantly related groups than these guys. These guys are much closer to us than either of us are to any of those other groups that I mentioned. So that makes them kind of fun, kind of cool. One of the reasons why I was especially excited to find this ochre star is because of, unfortunately, a complication, a danger, a risk that they are facing. There is something going on in the environment called seastar wasting disease. No one is entirely sure what causes this, but it seems to be some kind of microbe that maybe when a sea star is stressed, or maybe when it's susceptible to a little bit warmer waters, is able to kind of attack the tissue of the sea star and kill the sea star. And so this wasting disease is really taking off, and it's causing something of a crash in ochre star populations and others, about 20 different species of sea star. And like I said, no one is entirely sure what causes it. No one is entirely sure how to prevent it. Although it does certainly seem like cross-contamination is a thing. So, if you ever hold a sea star, make sure you wash your hands off before touching another sea star, just in case. But yeah, it's this big problem, and it's probably going to get bigger in light of climate change. Like I said, one of the things that seems to impact it is warming temperatures. And as global temperatures are on the rise, including seawater temperatures, wasting disease seems to be on the rise, spreading, impacting more and more populations of these sea stars. And like I said at the beginning, they're kind of a keystone species. So because they're predators, because they eat so many things, because they have such a dramatic impact on their environment, when you take that out, maybe because of sea star wasting disease, it really has this impressive ripple effect on the rest of the ecosystem, where some of their preys get really, really big, which means that some of those things that their prey species eat get decimated extra hard. This can impact whole kelp forests and the ecology within them. So it's a kind of big deal that we're still trying to figure out. But I was very excited to find this one and some of its buddies over in this tide pool. And so to see that at least here on the Humboldt coast of California, got some decent representation by ochre stars. One final note on sea stars. You will note that I've been calling them in this video sea stars and not starfish. That is not a coincidence. There is a reason for that. This is not a fish. Fish have vertebra. Fish have bilateral symmetry like us. These have neither of those things. Sea stars are not a fish. And so to call them a starfish seems kind of silly. So sea star is really a better name for these creatures. They live in the sea. They are shaped like stars. Sea star is what I would encourage you, and I definitely use when referring to creatures like this. So a little information on names of sea stars, but also on sea star biology, on ochre stars, on these amazing, beautiful creatures. Thank you very much for the view. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you get to go out and do some tide pooling. And until next time, enjoy the natural world.